Well, hello, Miller fam. We are out here in the garden and there was a flood. A flood, and I didn't even know it. We must have had what the locals call gully washer last night. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad here. The garden, it's gonna be actually a good bit of work. But this is, we got a lot of questions. Why raised beds? Why'd you put raised beds in? What are you doing, Gabriel, spending all that money on raised beds? Well, where we live, we are on a hillside. And what the garden used to look like was a hillside, even steeper than that. And you can see leaves all the way from our woods. Went all the way down there. There's even some chert, gravel from our drive that went all the way down there. That's gonna be tough to grow some grass. But that was what we had here in the garden before we put in the terraces and before we put in the raised beds. And so we did have some issues last night. Mainly issues where there wasn't really water breaks, in which case we're gonna have to put in some water bars and need to think about that. So right here, a spot where we had a lot of water coming off our roof, come through here. And this is actually a good example of what would happen. Say if I just have my my traditional in-ground raised beds, like 30-inch beds on rows, right here. Everything, this whole bed, 3-4 inches, actually about 6 inches of material gone. Just gone. Completely wiped out this bed of onions. Down here it's not so bad. We've got some new comfrey planted. You can see just ripped this comfrey up by the roots. I mean, there's down to hard pan, or down to the, look at that, you can see that onion stopped that little snippet of wood chips there. But that's what would have happened to our whole garden, if you can believe it. We wouldn't have it. It looks like from the rain gauge we've got, we maybe had 5 inches of rain in probably less than 45 minutes, something like that. I mean, it was insane. In which case, it's hard for anything to handle that much water capacity. The garlic bed looks a whole lot better. It looks like it didn't really wash out. It just kind of flooded around. So once I go in there and weed it again, it should be fine. So we'll kind of play that. But you can see the wood chips in here. This would have been the garden, right? This would have been the garden. Look at this. I mean, it would have just been down to the bare nothing. We're finishing putting our irrigation in, but luckily we've got raised beds, in which case we didn't lose anything. The raised beds contained everything. Our hillside actually stood up pretty nicely, to be honest. I'm pretty happy with how the hillside looked, but we get a lot of, why the raised beds? Why the raised beds? Well, where we live, and in our certain context, and even if we didn't even need to put the terraces in, or even if we weren't on a hill, my goodness, 5 inches, I mean, what are you going to do? You're just going to, everything that you have on that top terrace would then be on the second terrace, and then the next event, you've got it on the third terrace, going down there, and then it ends up in my pond. So it's tough. And then we've got an in-ground here that will be a project this year that we have fruit trees planted, and so we're continuing to plant fruit trees there. But these beds, we didn't lose anything. The material that we hay with the horses eat the hay, the horses create the manure, which creates the compost, which fills up our beds. I mean, look at this. This was actually the worst spot, and this, we did actually break up some of our terrace, or our slope there. And what I'm seeing is that not only is the new barn throwing a lot of rain there, but there's an unmitigated break there. So basically free access for that water to come down. So what we're gonna probably have to do is either back that up with some boards. I'm not 100% sure yet, but that was the worst spot. And you can see here, we did lose quite a bit of wood chips right there. That's no fun, because that's just extra wheelbarrow work. And as you can see, these wood chips, how clumped up they are. But we didn't lose. I mean, as bad as that is just a inconvenience. Had we have lost all of our compost, all of our soil, all of our growing material, all of our humus here on these raised beds, that would have been more than an inconvenience. That would have been a problem. Same here in this hoop house. It did get pretty wet in here. We can see where it got wet, but we maintained basically everything. And look at that row of peas. Is that not just beautiful? These ones are coming up. They're a little bit more shaded on this side, so they're a little bit slower over here. The collards looking really good. But yeah, let's come up here. it's somewhat of the same story. I am happy, like I said, I am happy with how the slopes have handled themselves, especially up here. We don't really have any like landslide type of deals there, which it does help that we put in the road access, and we did all of our earthworking this past fall. Everything's on slope, and we sloped up here to go behind the hoop house there, behind the greenhouse. That doesn't help us right there in the middle though, and that is something that we're going to have to address. You can see here, so much water, all this water coming through, but we didn't lose anything in our raised beds, which is the key. There's rutabagas here, kohlrabi going to seed, all of our starts. I was worried last night, I don't know if they were if the rain come this way, but I was worried like these tomato seedlings, I've been kind of just getting them outside, it's been warm enough, but I was worried my trays were all going to be gone or flooded out, but actually they're not. You can see we've got quite a bit of water in here. Water is just something we have to deal with. It is what it is. But again, the raised beds. Ladies and gentlemen, it would have been, and if you live in a climate where this is not a freak occurrence, this is hey, we got a gully washer. Neighbor called me up, hey, we got a gully washer. Yeah, we did get a gully washer. Are you still all right up there? Well, we've got the garden still. The pathways and the wood chips kind of washed up, and then we go back and forth on this weed fabric or this landscape fabric on, well, do we like it, do we not, do we like it, do we not? No, I don't love it, but say we had this gully washer that we just had, this gully washing event, my wood chips would be gone. I'd have 3 or 4 inches of sticky mud underneath here, and I wouldn't be able to get any work done. I wouldn't be able to bring in more wood chips. I wouldn't be able to respread these wood chips for a week, 10 days, maybe even longer. So I'm not super opposed to the landscape fabric. But again, a raised bed. This is Bridget's raised bed, perfectly, amended. We've got compost or horse manure breaking down here. We've got compost underneath. We didn't lose this. We didn't lose any of it. None of it, absolutely none of it. And that is the goal. So we're not losing any of the good stuff, the wood chips, the pathways. That can all be addressed. And obviously we will address it. And once it dries up a little bit, we'll come in here, respread it out, and add more wood chips where needed. The only thing that we did have a problem was down there, those 4-inch beds. We don't have any issues here on asparagus bed or any on the strawberry bed, but that onion bed certainly has some problems. And we're just gonna have to, there's no water bars. We need to put some water bars in up here. And I think that's gonna help, and we'll water bar it to where we'll kind of circumvent that water where it heads down to the pond that way and not traversing through the garden. So, hey, there was a flood. And no, we didn't have an arc for it this time, but it could have been a lot worse. And it could be, and you know what? For all intents and purposes, again, this is an inconvenience, something that we can certainly deal with, something that we'll have to deal with continually. This isn't something that's like, oh, you know what, we got everything figured out here. When you get that much rain in that short of an amount of time, there's not much you're going to be able to do. And the fact that that's not a isolated occurrence, that's something that we just have to deal with. That's something that we have to plan for. But all this garden, all this space, all these beds here, we've got like 24 of these beds planted with white potatoes and red potatoes and Yukon Gold potatoes, would have been gone. You see that? Remember that comfrey I showed you down there? If those were in-ground raised beds, and we got the rain event that we just had, I don't care what type of sloping you have, I don't care, beds going north, south, east, you would have found those potatoes. Those potatoes would have been there, and you'd have had to deal with them. And I'm sure there's lots of guys that plowed up and in our area that planted potatoes in the last few weeks, and they're out there looking at potatoes right now because that was some rain. So, hey, the pond probably looks beautiful right now, though. But hey, make sure you like, share, subscribe. Let us know. Do you use raised beds? Do you have to deal with rain events like we have to deal with? Because we certainly are dealing with rain events here. Always have in this area, and we just kind of will. But again, the raised beds are certainly helpful. I've got to go make some breakfast, but we love you all. Thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing. Hit that little bell. Be notified when our new videos post. Focusing on YouTube quite a bit more. And we'll see you all in another video soon. Bye-bye, everyone.